picture was printed sometime in the 1860s, and for various reasons. The expert who authenticated my picture and analyzed it believes that it was not done by J.S. Bibbin. He just copied a daguerreotype, which was very, very, very common. It was also in the 1860s that a daguerreotype of Emma Smith from Nauvoo from the 1840s also was copied in Missouri, ended up in Julia Murdoch Smith's family album. So it had already happened. But it ended up in a Smith family album, according to the person who had it before me, and he owned it. It never deviated, whether he thought it was Joseph Smith or not. He still said it came from a Smith family album. And I did find out over time, if you watch my videos, all I knew when I first bought it was that also in Newark, Illinois, in 1844, around May 1844, Joseph Smith Jr., the leading president who was the first president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who I think is in the picture that I own because we have his death mask. He was running a presidential campaign, so his cousin, George Albert Smith, was here in May 1844. And then you've got some records. A lot of these things, I just will read his memoirs, or I just search things and I find something new all the time. Anyway, he's actually Joseph III was born in Ohio. But we're going to pull up Nauvoo, Illinois, and only one of their children that lived to adulthood was born in Nauvoo, and that was David Hiram Smith, who was the baby in that picture I show and talk a lot about. But George Albert Smith did go here in 1844. We know that. And we do know that Joseph Smith III started traveling this way. He started doing some traveling when he started leading the reorganized church. And so he did go to, let's put Amboy on here. So it was about April 1860 that Emma and Joseph Smith III travel out here. And he'd been married, he had some children, but his family was there. His wife was from there, his mother was there. So he goes there and he has the meeting, and they ordain him, sort of similar as the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints does from those pictures. But Amboy, this is where he was about April 1860, October 1860, according to the memoirs. He mentions Millington, Illinois. So Joseph Smith III. There's a lot of different ways on roads today to get there, but and he says he's in an area that his George Albert Smith proselyted and worked, and he went to Newark. George Albert Smith, 1844. But he mentions being about 4 miles, like he's basically on the Fox River. And he's outside of Millington. These towns are very, very close. And as far as census records go for 1860, you do have J.S. Bibbin, who is the man who, for some Smith family, because I've seen the pictures from the Smith family, Millington, so he's around here, but Joseph Smith III starts mentioning towns south of Newark. So it's just, he very well was traveling in some of those cities. He just starts mentioning that he's kind of like, I think he mentions the city, LaSalle. He's like, sort of there. I'm like, that's not close. But, like Harmony, Pennsylvania, I screwed up in a few of my videos thinking I would point out at the map and say, well, Harmony doesn't exist anymore, but it's like way over here. And it, I didn't Google it. Church history sites. And then when I did, I was like, oh, it is not far from where. So we're going to go ahead and go to where did it all start? So, where was J.S. Bibbin born? That's where it starts to get really interesting to me. So we go to Wilkes Barre, Pennsylvania. So if you look at his headstone and things like that, it gets a lot more specific. This is where he was born in 1821. J.S. Joseph Slocum Bibbins to an Elisha Bibbins. And his mother, I'm going to post for both of their names. But his father, ironically, we can link to being in Susquehanna in 1812. Before he was, his father, Elisha, got married in 1814, but in 1812, he was a traveling minister and mentioned in many of these books that are published about the Methodist faith that was new at that time. And Emma Smith was very active, even as a little 12-year-old. She was just very excited to be a part of their meetings and to go into the woods, this congregation, and they mentioned Elisha Bibbins was the minister at that time. And there's a good article by Mark Staker, who doesn't believe there's a photograph of Joseph Smith, but that's okay. He wrote pretty extensively about Emma Smith's family and dedicated at least mentions Elisha Bibbins twice, I think. So I wouldn't have known about it without his paper. You know, he has his things that he researches and believes, and then other historians believe other things. But it is a good 100-page article about Emma Smith's, the Hale family, about Emma's family. And has Harmony, you won't find Harmony, but it is Susquehanna. So if I'm the actual place where her house was and where, you know, she got married in 1827. So Joseph was, I think, was actually 20 when he came out. I don't think he was 21 yet when he first came out here. Almost 20. So he was really actually 19. She was an older woman. She's a year older. But, you know, they dated for a year. Anyway. But, yeah, that's 1826. But 1812, you know, as I'm researching this and looking at there's a lot of family history sites for the Bibbins. And you do see he gets married, and for sure by 1821, J.S. Bibbins is down here. But he's just goes, you know, it's not super far away. So I guess I thought Harmony was like way over here. I thought it was more straight down from Palmyra, but it really is not that far. So, but then we can place, according to several resources, the best is the Kendallican website, which a man put together who is from Kendall County. And then they list, the Bibbins family is listed as being pioneers, so they're near Scranton up until 1838 is when they come down to Kendall County and live in Newark and just stay there until all of them die. Actually, J.S. Bibbins died in Plano. This is where J.S. Bibbins died around 1890, but then was buried in Millington. So just so much back and forth, and so much stepping on the same ground of Joseph Smith III and all of the sons. And so really, so it was 1866, Joseph Smith III is here, January, and then the letters really start about August 1866 that we have. It doesn't mean those were the first letters from his mother. I don't think she waited 8 months after her son and his family moved. And then again, who knows? They could have been mad. I don't know. I see no indication of that. I think that's just the first one that came up. And ironically, since my picture doesn't have a sun stamp, it doesn't have that tax. The quality of, if you actually look at J.S. Bibbins' photography, it is really good. It's pretty even lighting on the face of most of his subjects. It's a very light background. And it's generally pretty clear. I mean, and he makes it really big. You can see pretty far above the head and around the body, and you've got objects like a chair and a couch, and Sometimes it's zoomed in, and he does do that oval shape and decorate. So someone took a pencil and just tried to sort of decorate, but then some of them I'm sure he charged a lot more money. There's some images of J.S. Bibbins that are just highly decorated, but this one that I have, it's just a pencil lining, but I did have that. So yeah, 1866 to 1881. J.S. Bibbins is here from 1838 till 1890s. It dies here, buried here. So he for sure went there. And then Emma did come here for sure around, we can just go ahead and pull up Plano, Illinois, and get the directions from, it's just kind of just for perspective, from Nauvoo. So in her letter in August 1866, her husband, Bibbin, Major Bibbin, was just demanded that she just go see your son. Because it just had to have been really hard. She's lost so many children. That was the first time she'd been away from Joseph III and his children and his wife, But she did have Alexander's family there, and then Alex was over in Utah at that time. And she's just like, bring him home. Please, just don't live and let live. Let them live their lives. Stop going there and trying to tell them what to do. That's her letters, guys. Yeah, she did go here because David Hiram Smith has letters from the early 1870s. He gets married here and then has a child. He has one child. But he's just having a really hard time. And she came there and brought him a bed and just was really trying to help David out. And he just says, thank you so much for coming. Because before that, you have all these letters, just please, Mom, come here. Please move here. We will take care of you. Move to Plano. Begging her to move there just to come, But she talks about going in 1866. And I think David still lived in Nauvoo. But I don't know everything, but the more I research, even Alexander Smith had a child in Plano and was in Kendall County area. I think he was actually more north than Plano. I'll pop it in here. One census record I did find of Alexander. And then lastly, I think I did find that a new census record of 1865 that somewhere, wherever J.S., I don't know where his house was. You've got these whole areas, but was this also, because the census records say Big Grove, so Big Grove is going to really, you can just search it yourself, but it does include Newark, Illinois, but it goes kind of south. So Garden Grove doesn't include Plano, but he died in around 1890 in the same town. Joseph Smith III spent 16 years. And so about 1881, Joseph Smith III does leave things, and there was the fight over the land around 1890, so they were trying, but the sons did secure, and it ended up really just being Joseph Smith III and Alexander, because David just ended up in an institution for the rest of his life, and but him and Alexander, I think went here first. I'd have to look it up. I'm pretty sure he moved to Missouri. Yeah, Alexander just moved his whole family to Missouri before Emma died, because the granddaughter of Emma, mentioned just a memory of her own. So Alexander's wife was basically like raised by Emma because her parents died. They moved to Nauvoo and her parents got sick and just died. And the saints had already left, but the granddaughter just realized how so heartbroken she was that they had moved and then Emma died. So not long after, and she just, of course, they're all devastated. But to her, she was really like her mom, not just her mother-in-law. She really was like her mom. But this is where Joseph Smith III was living when he was writing those letters. But as far as that duplicate oil painting, he was in Iowa, wherever he was in Iowa. I'm not an expert of where he lived in Iowa, but that's where the duplicate oil painting ended up. So he did around before 1899. He had it made because he donated it at that point, but it might have been around the time he came down here, is possible. It was 1899. Just before, so Joseph III dies around 1814, around here. But he travels all over the place. You know, you've got Alexander going to, interestingly enough, Australia. And a lot of Joseph Smith's descendants, for some reason, a high number of them are in Australia, and Alexander went here. And so they did sort of settle the reorganized church in Australia. So before he died, he went there. Maybe a few other countries. Alexander was really sent on a lot of missions. California, he had a lot of letters from California from Alexander Smith, and Joseph III went to Utah a lot. So they were really going. But trains. They did have trains, so it really made it a lot easier, but they would go visit family, and he did go visit, and he got along really well, and he mended things with Joseph F. Smith, his cousin. And so, interestingly enough, Joseph F. Smith said he had a Daguerrean. So, but it's just for people that are not members of the church, and you're trying to understand 1800s, you've got Joseph Smith Jr., the one whose daguerreotype we're talking about. His kids stay around here. I mean, they do. Alex and Joseph III did come here, but they would only visit Utah, you know, and there still was a huge disconnect. And so there was really huge disconnect of BYU, I believe, in 1962 with Independence, Missouri, with the reorganized church still, to the point that William B. McCarl, when he wrote that, he just did not, reading it, he has no idea about the Saints Herald articles talking about the painting. So his theories just dive off in different directions just because of lack of knowledge. He just did not have any access. He had access to come from Provo to Salt Lake. It's just his own little world, you know. Today there's like 16 million members of the church, but in 1962 not as many, and there's no internet. So anyway, you just see you have the base, and still the headquarters of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is here, and the headquarters of the organized church is here. But they do share a lot of information and try to share today, but in 1962 not so much, and even in the 1990s it's very clear people that were writing books about Joseph Smith's photograph just didn't know. The Saints Herald was very specific about certain things about the forward-facing painting, making it very clear that painting was not done post-mortem. It was not based on a daguerreotype, but very well the painting that did end up in Iowa, 1899, Joseph III, and donated the duplicate oil painting that shows like the step deformity that we have several doctors and researchers finding on the skulls in the early 1990s, 1995, mid-90s. But so that painting, I do really believe, had some influence that wasn't the death mask. Okay, so the reorganized church didn't have the death masks, ever. So for these specific details to show up in the duplicate oil painting but not be shown in the original oil painting that ended up in Independence and is still in Independence, Missouri, but this duplicate oil painting, then his 1910 letter makes sense. It makes sense because he's saying in that oil painting, we helped sustain the characteristic likeness of my father by the use of the daguerreotype of my father, done when he was alive, around maybe 1843. But then he mentions Lucian Foster, so it had to have been 1844. He thinks everything was 1843, but he only lives 4 more years. He is losing his vision, and he's just having a lot of health problems. So, but in 1879, he said his dad was 36, so that puts it in 1842, or maybe December 1842. But it was David Rogers. That was September 1842. His dad was 36. I'm sure Emma knew. She was very smart and very sharp. She knew her dates. And your dad, how old was Dad when that painting was done? 36. 36. I'm sure that it probably came from her, and maybe she probably didn't give them September 1842, boys. It was probably your dad was 36, you know? So it just telling them ages, and they just got to look at that painting. But did Emma like that painting that much? Not really, but it looked enough like her husband. She loved it and didn't want it copied until she died in spring 1879. So, you know, I mean, today there's not a disconnect, but, you know, I mean, the Joseph Smith papers, anyone can look at, you know, and the Saints Herald, anyone can look at now. You can look at that online. And so they've started putting some stuff online, or someone did, whoever had, not sure who put that whole on there, but it's really great that they did. So, and there's just so many other things to research. I'm just gonna keep finding stuff out. You have several people's lives that lived to a good old age. You know, Joseph III was born in 1832 and died in 1914. So David Hiram ended up in Elgin, something like that. But David Hiram did live in Plano, so he has the letters from Plano for a little bit of time because he was married in Sandwich. Going back to Sandwich. You know, it's just kind of like anyone that lives in a city. You might go to a different city for this or that, and that's clearly what happened. And Joseph III traveled a lot. J.S. Bibbins for sure did travel to Plano. So I think my theory is possibly he had what Emma talked about so much in her letters, which was like a photo car. She kept talking about a photo car, which was basically like a little wagon, you know. And looking at here, I don't know what it was like back then, but it really appears like Plano was a much bigger city. Sandwich, you know, Newark, really small. When I look it up, it looks extremely small. So, again, if you look up Garden Grove, it's like this whole area. But Kendall County is, I don't know about that city, but definitely Sandwich, Plano, Newark. They were all Kendall County, so they all end up on the Kendallican website, which is a really cool resource. It is legit. It just looks very 1980s, very beginnings of. They have an explanation of that on the Kendallican website about Kendall County, and they talk about Joseph Smith III, and they had built the temple there. I'm always going to find something new. And I even found in 1865, which even when I went on Ancestry, it was a new census record where J.S. Bibbins is on there, and right below his name was a William Smith. And according to my mom, who works a lot with like literally works with the Family History Center, she's like, that means they're neighbors. I think that means they're neighbors. So we think it means that he was neighbors with a William Smith. When I looked him up and researched him, he, you know, of course he's a Smith, but he has a family line coming from Vermont to New York and then to this area of Illinois. And the mother, going back to the grandmother in the 1700s, there's a Smith marrying about the same time that Lucy Mack Smith married Joseph Smith Sr. This is different. It's not them, but it's... I'll show you when I research more, but this particular Smith line also married into the Mack family. Like, the wife's name was Mack. It wasn't Lucy Mack Smith, but it was that line that brought to this William Smith. Because at first I thought maybe it's that William, but it's not the brother William, but they really could be a relation with this person who was a next door neighbor with him. And I could, you know, I'm not afraid to research and see, well, if I do find my photo in someone else's photo album and it's really someone else, but it matches the death mask too well. And the background looks like Lucien Foster's background, who was in Nauvoo, Illinois. and we have Emma's picture by Lucian Foster, and we also have Wilford Whitphoebe and Wilford's. I believe that in the church catalog, I believe they have Lucian Foster's individual photos of each of them, because that's according to his journals. And the background of my picture looks like Lucian Foster's. It looks like his lighting, side lighting, also lower, like a gas lamp. I was just like, why is there light coming up, hitting the bottom cartilage of his nose instead of usually there's a little bit of a downcast lighting, especially, well, in the RLDS painting, there's a big shadow. The light is above him. But in this photo, this guy, and I could see that in several things I believe are Lucian Foster's. But it's hard to know with some of these daguerreotypes, because they, especially the early ones, it's just a metal plate in a case that they bought from somewhere, you know. They didn't necessarily sign or stamp it, so, but they're daguerreotypes, so yeah, the professional really believes that my picture, you know, doesn't look like, we both looked at Bibbin's work. It doesn't look like Bibbin's work was often even lighting, light background, tall background, and much clearer pictures than my picture ended up as. So this high contrast, lack of clarity, I think because there's such a lack of clarity, thinks it's possibly a daguerreotype of a daguerreotype, which would make the daguerreotype in the right perspective, and then you take a photo of that one. So there could be another daguerreotype of mine flipped around. That's why I talk about and sometimes show my picture flipped around, because I think there possibly is a daguerreotype that is mirrored, flipped around, like Instagram, people who are really young. So yeah. Again, I can't make a short video, but anyway, have a good day.